We are going to hear about our audit, and here to present this is our auditor from O'Connor, Munns and Dobbins. And Al, why don't you take that away?
Good morning. I'm Alan Cassay. I'm a partner with O'Connor Davies, and with me is Jeff Shaver. He's the manager on the audit engagement. We're going to go over the 2011 financial statements. I'd like to start on the first page after the table of contents, which is the independent auditor's report. In the first paragraph of the report, it tells you what we did. We audited the accompanying financial statements. The second paragraph discusses how we went about doing it in accordance with government auditing standards. And the third paragraph, probably one of the more important ones, is our opinion. And basically, it's an unqualified opinion. And it says that the financial statements refer to a point, Michael.
Is that all right if I sit over here?
Sure.
Sit here? Go on. Oh, I guess why don't you sit here? It's all right. I'll sit right. It's fine.
The financial statements refer to represent fairly in all material respects the financial position of the town as of December 31st, 2011, in conformity with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. It's an unqualified opinion, also known as a clean opinion, and it's the best opinion that you can get. If you flip to page 3, which is the next page, is the management's discussion and analysis, which is basically an overview and analysis of the financial activities that occurred in the town during the fiscal year 2011. I'd just like to take you through all the components of the report, and then we'll get into some of the more details. On page 16, which is the statement of net assets, this statement is relatively new. It came about, I think, 2004. And it is a government accounting standards pronouncement statement number 34. And basically what it does, it takes your fund level government funds, and it converts it from the modified accrual basis to the full accrual basis. And what that means, if you look on page 16, you'll see in the assets section, you have the capital assets, which are your land, your equipment. Those do not appear on your fund levels. When any capital asset is purchased through the fund level, it's recorded as an expenditure. Here it's capitalized and shown as an asset, so that's one major difference. In the liability section, the other major difference is the non-current liabilities, which consist of your bonds outstanding, the compensated absences, and the other post-employment benefit obligations, also known as OPEB. And then in the net assets section, you have your invested in capital assets, net of related debt, which are all the capital assets, which I mentioned up above in the asset section, less any outstanding debt that was used to acquire those assets. Okay. On page 17 is the statement of activities, which relates to the statement of net assets. And in this statement, what happens here is the program revenues are matched up with the expenditures, the functions within the government. You have the general government support and public safety. And then on the bottom of the page, you have general revenues, which are not applicable to any particular function or program. Now, if we can go to page 53, which is the general fund comparative schedule of revenues, expenditures, changes in fund balance, both budget and actual. On the left-hand side, you have the year-end 2011. On the right-hand side is 2010. And Jeff will take you through some of the details of this report.
Thanks, Alan. As Alan mentioned, on page 53, you see 2011. And on page 54, you see 2010 results. This is a 4-column presentation. You'll see original budget, the final budget, reflecting any amendments that the town board approved, actual results, and the fourth and final column is the variance between the final budget and the actual results for the year. Starting on the top, real property taxes, the budget was $11.85 million. No changes in the final budget. Actual results were $11.51 million. That's a 333 negative variance. That's mainly the result of lower collections of taxes during the 2011 fiscal year. The next line is other tax items. The budget was $1,148,000. Actual results $1,304,000. That's a positive variance of $155,000. Because collections were down, you see an increase in the interest and penalties on property taxes. So that's the main result for the positive there. Moving down to the next line, non-property taxes, the budget was $1,565,000. Actual revenues were $1,779,000. That's also a positive budget variance of $214,000. The main result of that positive is the sales tax collections coming in greater than budget. I'm going to skip down to licenses and permits. Budget was $465,000. The actual revenues were $533,000. That's a $68,000 positive budget variance. The main result of that is building permits coming in greater than budgeted. And then I'm going to skip down to state aid. State aid, the budget was $685,000. Actual revenues were $823,000. That's $138,000 positive budget variance. The main result of that positive budget variance is the mortgage tax collections being greater than budgeted. So you can see total revenues were budgeted at $17.3 million. Actual revenues were $17.595 million for a positive budget variance of $277,000. Moving down to the expenditure category.
Can I just ask one question on the
Sure.
333? That number's, that's taxes that are due but not paid. So
Exactly.
that's going to carry somewhere. They're going to get received eventually.
They're still due. They're still
Okay.
due to the town. and
So it's
they're
not
reported-
lost revenue, it's just revenue that hasn't come in yet.
It's revenue that you can't recognize in 2011.
Right, okay,
Because we could only recognize collections within 60 days after year end.
correct.
So anything beyond that, any collections that haven't been received at that point in time, we set up an allowance for that. And this is a result of that calculation.
So that would be basically,
It's a timing issue.
but I'm saying that would probably roll from year to year, so it's almost would balance itself out, I would think.
Right.
It's almost like a
If you look at
receivable.
2010, you'll see
Yeah.
that the negative variance was 612,000.
Okay,
So the collections have improved slightly, so the adjustment to the allowance was
It's
reduced.
actually lower, because in 9 it was 600,000 too. So actually it's
getting
lower,
better.
We're getting better.
Getting better.
Right.
which means less penalty fees,
Right.
but,
Right.
Less revenue
People-
for the interest and penalties, but more revenue for
Yeah.
collections.
so it's normal and
Yeah.
not terrible.
Good, thank you.
Moving on with the expenditures, general government support, the budget was 4.536. The final budget was 4.339 million. Actual expenditures were 3.916 million. That's a positive budget variance of 422,000. There's multiple line items that make that up, but the two biggest ones are unspent contingency funds, which is 200,000 that the town didn't use in 2011, as well as judgments and claims of about 140,000, which the town underspent. So those are the two biggest factors in the 422,000 positive budget variance. The next line down is public safety. The original budget was $7,691,000. Final budget was $7,964,000. Actual expenditures were $8,062,000. The main result of the negative budget variance is the police department overspent their budget in 2011. And the next lines, health, transportation, economic opportunity and development, culture and rec, home community services, essentially met or beat their budget by small amounts. You can see on the right side, 61,000, 15,000, 40,000, 65,000. So total expenditures, you can see the original budget was 16,929,000. The final budget's 16,906,000. Actual expenditures were 16,397,000. That's a positive budget variance of 508,000. So adding in the revenue positive budget variance of 277,000 that I mentioned before to the expenditure positive budget variance of 508,000, that's a total positive budget variance on the expenditures of 785,000. Taking into account other financing sources and uses, which is towards the bottom of the page, you can see is insurance recoveries were 98,000 better than budget. Those obviously can't be anticipated and generally not budgeted. Transfers out, the general fund transfers money to the capital fund, transfers money to the debt service fund to pay debt, and there was a positive budget variance there of $142,000. So on other financing sources and uses, there's a positive budget variance of $240,000. Adding that to the expenditure and revenue positive budget variance, you have a total positive budget variance of $1,026,000.
And looking at the third line up from the bottom, the net change in fund balance, in the original budget column, the first number that bracketed $154,000, that's the amount of the prior year's fund balance. It's the amount that was anticipated being utilized of the fund balance to balance the 2011 budget, but you actually returned, you had a positive actual results of $906,000. So you actually returned $1,026,000 to the budget. And then if you take the $906,000 positive results for the actual and add it to the fund balance at the beginning of the year of $2,338,000, you ended the year with a total fund balance of $3,244,000. And if you flip back one page to page 52, this is the general fund comparative balance sheet. If you look at the top portion of the page in the assets, you'll see that the taxes receivable went from $27,396,000 in 2010 to $33,870,000 in 2011. And this is primarily due to the uncollected school taxes, which in 2010 were $26.7 million, in 2011 was $33.1 million. Going down to the fund balance section, you'll see that the terminology, the captions there have changed. The Government Accounting Standards Board, also known as GASB, came out with a new pronouncement that was effective for the town in the current year, where they changed the terminology. Prior years, you would have seen reserve for various components. You'd also see designations, and you would have seen unreserved fund balance. All these terminologies have changed, and now they're non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. Within each category, the non-spendable is the prepaid expenditures. If you look up the second number from the bottom in the asset section, you'll see the $135,000. The restricted is the reserve for workers' compensation of $1,692. The committed is a designation established by the board for open space of $9,700. And the assigned are encumbrances, which are purchase orders which were issued at the end of 2011 for goods and services that were not received at that point in time. So those funds are encumbered, and that's $103,000. And the unassigned is $2,994,000, which is your undesignated fund balance. And as a percentage of the 2012 budget, that's approximately 17%. And if you remember, in 2009, the board passed a fund balance policy to maintain the undesignated fund balance in the general fund between 10 and 20%. Last year, the undesignated fund balance was 12%. So you've increased that 5%, and you're approaching the 20%. So you have a healthy fund balance. And it's in accordance with your fund balance policy. Are there any questions on anything at this point?
It's a small question, but it's puzzling because the 2011 budget had no appropriated fund balance assigned for the general
Correct.
fund, but you've got in here that we did budget $120,000. I can't figure out where that's coming
Those are the
from.
encumbrances from the prior year.
Oh, okay.
Because when the GASB 34 statement came out, prior to GASB 34, the encumbrances from the prior year were always added to the final budget. GASB 34 is requiring us to add it to the original budget.
Okay.
So
Because that wasn't what we approved. We approved no appropriation.
the budget that you approved was $103,000 less, or $120,000.
Right, exactly.
Than what the number is shown there.
Right, okay.
Because GASB 34 required us to incorporate the encumbrances from the prior year into the original budget.
Okay, that makes sense.
Next, I'd like to go to page 62, which is the highway fund. And again, the format is the same with the original budget, final budget, the actual, and then the variance with the final budget positive and negative. And you have the results for 2011 as well as 2010. In the highway fund, if you go down to the third number up from the bottom, the net change in fund balance, you have a bracketed $720,000, which means that the revenues fell short of the actual budgeted expenditures by that amount, including the transfers out. And primarily that was due to, within the general government support, if you look at that actual number of $390,000 versus the prior year of $5,000, that was primarily due to litigation expenses for the Westwood settlement. And the transportation line went from $4,267,000 to $4,597,000, and those were various increases in expenses throughout all the activity within that budgeted line item. So if you go back down to the actual column towards the bottom, the net change in fund balance, the negative $720,000 added to the fund balance at the beginning of the year, $940,000, $984,000. You end the year with the fund balance of $263,000. And if you flip back to page 61, you'll see in the liability section the bond anticipation notes payable of $353,000. That was a ban issued to pay the settlement for the Westwood litigation. And the assigned fund balance, all funds except the general fund will have an assigned fund balance as long as it's a positive number. They will not have an unassigned or an undesignated fund balance. So in the highway fund, it's $263,000, which you saw on the previous page. Included in that number is $150,000, which is designated for the 2012 budget, and the balance of $107,000 is the undesignated fund balance, which is approximately 2% of the 2012 appropriations. In the prior year, included in the $984,000 total fund balance, the undesignated portion was 17% of the 2011 budget. So this budget has decreased significantly in the current year, but now that the litigation is behind you, hopefully next year, this will again turn around and have a positive surplus at the end of the year.
Are we also getting, Howard, I read that, I think it's is it New York State or FEMA is refunding all storm money that we expended for the hurricane and then the, what was the other storm? The hurricane and the snowstorm.
October
So we're getting all of that back?
I don't think it's...
Not getting all of it.
Not getting all back. We're hoping to get a percentage of it. I thought we weren't getting anything for the snowstorm, but has that been altered again?
To the best of my knowledge, you are not getting anything for the snow itself. But
Only
you are
for
getting all
the hurricane.
Unless there was something else submitted that I'm not aware of.
Well, I just read something this week that there was I don't know if the state did it or the governor,
Yeah.
I think the governor did it.
Well-
He was going to reimburse all municipalities for the total cost of those storms. Above and beyond, I think it was.
I'm not sure, because I saw that also. It was a little confusing, because FEMA said we wouldn't be reimbursed for the snowstorm because we didn't meet the threshold of $30 million in damage in the area. And I'm not sure then if the governor's going to just take that money and give it to the counties that met the FEMA standard, or if he's going to do it all over. I'm not sure. I haven't gotten a definition on that. Yeah, I saw
I got to
it.
look into it, because,
Yeah.
so you're saying that they might look at it as if the county had
Right.
that amount of damage, then
Right.
the municipalities would qualify.
Right.
Not the
And-
individual
and Westchester
municipality.
did not qualify.
We didn't,
No, under the FEMA standards. But there are counties that did, so I don't know.
Because what I read was all, but it may have been written wrong, but what I read was
I saw that also.
all
Yeah.
expenses due to those two storms would be reimbursed to help the local, the local municipalities.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So when that money does come in next year, it'll definitely help the situation in the fund balance here in the highway fund.
Right.
Are there any questions regarding this?
So what was your unassigned? Numbers, you said it's 2% currently for,
In the highway fund, yes.
where is that on here?
It's, if you turn to page, I believe it's 48. 48, yes, on page 48, because of the new pronouncement, CASB 54, we put this additional note in the financial statements this year to show you the crosswalk between the prior fund balance categories and the current fund balance. So if you look at the highway fund on the left-hand side, which is 2011, you'll see that the designated for subsequent years is 150,000. The undesignated or the assigned is 106,000, and that's what the 2% represents. It's based on that number. And in the prior year, in 2010, on the right-hand side of the page, that amount was $824,000,
Got it.
which was, I think, 17%. And all funds that are displayed here, you'll see the general fund, which we went over all the details. You have the prepaid expenditures, the committed for the open space, the assigned, which is the purchase orders, also known as encumbrances, and then the unassigned is $2,994,000. So that was a major change in the financial statements for the current year. And all this information is spelled out in the narrative in management's discussion and analysis, which is the definition of each of the categories and the level of the hierarchy as to how these funds are dispersed between them.
That's it?
That's it.
I'm gonna go through library, or, no, did you do that already?
I'm sorry?
You're gonna do library too?
We can go through that, sure. If you go back to page 62, which is the highway fund, the pages after that is the library fund. On page 65, the actual revenues for the year were $1,560,000. The expenditures were $1,581,000, resulting in a shortfall of $21,000. And the fund balance at the beginning of the year was $196,000, resulting in an ending fund balance of $175,000. And flipping back to page 64, you see the fund balance again is considered assigned, and the bulk of that is the undesignated piece, which is approximately a little over, about 11% of the subsequent appropriations for 2012.
And we used how much in 12? 50?
50 then.
And on page 48, that will give you that information. For the library fund, we're utilizing $50,000 of that to balance the 2012 budget. So the undesignated fund balance for the library is $125,000. And the third column from the left.
So when you say subsequent, it's actually current year.
Well,
Subsequent as of 2011, but it's current for us.
You
gotta remember, too,
2012.
We work backwards. You know, this year is always last year.
Exactly. So and then on the next page, you have all your special districts. You have the water districts, numbers 1 through number 7, the sewer districts, the street lighting districts, and then on page 69, you have the fire protection district and the parking district and the two ambulance districts. All of the fund balances within the special district funds are healthy except for water district number 6, which had a deficit of $12,000, which was established last year. And in the 2012 budget, you're going to be levying taxes in that district for the first time of $13,000. And you also budgeted the departmental income of $2,000 in 2012. So this deficit should be reduced going forward each year.
And are some of the others perhaps too high?
Some of them are excessive in terms of the subsequent year's appropriations.
Okay. And then some of them would need it with some improvements, but we'll have to look at that, and if we're way over, we need to pay attention to that.
And that's the balance sheet for all the special districts. Starting on page 70, you have the revenues and expenditures for all the districts. You can see some of them had positive surpluses during the year. Water District 1, number 2, number 4 had a shortfall of $59,000, but you still retained a healthy fund balance of $774,000 based on a budget of about $420,000. So that's one of the ones that might be a little
too healthy.
Yeah. What do you think a good percentage for that would have been?
The fund balance usually should be between 15 to 25%.
The special districts tend to be a little bit higher just because of
They tend to be a little
capital
bit higher.
improvements?
Exactly, because you never know what's going to come down the pike in terms of special needs or emergencies. So you do have to have what they call, rainy day fund to accommodate those without going
Yeah.
into a deficit.
We actually have some expenditures planned, so
Okay.
we'll look at those.
So water number 6 is the only one. After that, page 73 is the capital projects fund. And basically the fund balance there is all restricted to capital, which is $2,052,000. And the fourth number up from the bottom, the bond anticipation notes, the $1,379,000. Those are the short-term borrowings that you issue to cover the expenditures for various projects. And you can see the details of that $1,379 on pages 75 and 76, which is the project length schedule. This schedule shows each project from inception through December 31st, 2011. The second column is the authorized project budget. The second column is the expenditures and transfers out. The third column is the unexpended balance, which is the expenditures subtracted out of the project budget. And if you look down in the unexpended column, the unexpended balance column, halfway down the page, you'll see the highway equipment in 2007 exceeded its budget by $21,000. And a little further down, the sewer nitrogen removal project exceeded its budget by $46,570. And if you look at page 76 in the fund balance deficit column, you'll see that certain projects have a deficit. The sewer number 2 odor control has a deficit of $61,250, but those bond anticipation notes, which I mentioned, one of them has been issued for this project for the same amount of the deficit. So as that bond anticipation note gets paid off, it's being paid off over 5 years, the revenue is picked up each year when you pay down the band, and that'll offset that deficit. So eventually, if things stay as they are, that deficit will be zero when the project is completed. And you have several other bands outstanding. There are a few projects that do have deficits that do not have the bonds outstanding to cover the deficit. You'll see the $83,000 deficit. If I could read this across the column, that would be a good trick. The Technology 2007 project, I believe, has a deficit of $83,000, but the outstanding band is only $62,000. So over time, there will be a deficit in that project once the band is paid off, and then it's up to the board as to how they want to eliminate that deficit. And the two options are to transfer the money into the general fund to offset it, or to issue an additional ban.
You can do that?
Yes,
You can go from general to highway?
You can, yes. So it's from general to capital to offset the deficit.
Oh, general to capital,
General
okay.
to capital.
To offset a
To
deficit.
offset the deficit,
Okay.
to eliminate the deficit, to close the project.
And you would do that normally if it's probably a nominal amount like this,
Exactly.
not an excessive amount.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because all the bans that you've issued in the current year and the ones that you issued last year, if you turn to page, let me find the page here now. If you turn to page 42, that's a listing of the short-term capital borrowings. Those are all the bond anticipation notes outstanding as of December 2011. In the last column, you'll see the $1,379,000, and in the first column, you see each of the projects that each of the bans issued for are applicable to. And if you look in the fourth column, the rate of interest, you'll notice that the interest rates are less than 1%.
Okay. Then we just remove for a lower rate?
Yes, we just renewed for 0.74%.
What debt was that? This,
Yes.
was it this? Okay.
So in terms of your borrowing and the rate of interest, they're very beneficial at this point in time. What you hear, they're going to remain that way for a while.
So we went back to page 74. That band number, wait, am I on the right page?
From 76.
76.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And the majority of the other capital projects on page 75 and 76, the ones that were not funded by bond anticipation, those were primarily funded through the column that says proceeds of obligations, which are long-term bonds. And there's an additional schedule for that as well.
And what's our total, around 10 or 12 million now for our long-term bonds, or is it more than that?
Page-
That's 16, right? That's 16.
16? Still a very low percentage of the total.
On page 43, you have a list of all the bonds outstanding. It's $16,807,000 at the end of the year.
According to the note in the beginning that I saw, Mike, that 7% would be like the max you want to go, we're
Right.
at about 4.
Okay. Because that, when we've gone,
Yes.
when we've had the Moody's reviews, they've always noted that we're always below on our total debt, which is good. So what was the bump? Well, I guess it's the roads. That's a big part of the bump up, because we were around 12 until
So if you
recently.
look at the top of the page on 43, you'll see that the bonds outstanding at the beginning of the year were 15 million. You issued 2.5 million, and you paid off 758,000, giving you the ending balance of 16,807,000. And the 2.5 million was issued in the current year at interest rates ranging from 1.25% to 3% over the life of the bond. And which will mature in 2026, in another 14 years.
So they're 15-year bond.
Right. And the other issue on page 40, starting on page 44, which I mentioned earlier, is the other post-employment benefit obligations. And on page 46, you'll see the actuarial components of that. Basically, this was another GASB pronouncement that came out in 2000, I believe it was 8. It was effective for 2009. And what this pronouncement forces all municipalities to do is the town and every other municipality pays for the retirees' health benefits. Up until this GASB pronouncement, you were only recording the amount that you paid for retirees' health benefits on a pay-as-you-go basis. Meaning each year with your health bill, you were paying the health expenditures for the retirees. This pronouncement requires you to have an actuarial analysis done of not only the liability for the retirees, but also all active employees. So if you look on page 46, the first number on top, the actuary accrued liability of $37,289,000 is the liability for all retirees and current employees based upon when they started to work for the town, their age, their longevity projections, and so forth. Down at the middle of the page, you'll see the annual required contribution to fund that liability is $3,186,000. There's an interest component of $251,000, which is added to the liability because in New York State, the only way to fund this liability is to put the money into an irrevocable trust, but New York State has not established such a trust, so you cannot fund this liability. Plus, you're not required to fund it, but even if you wanted to, you couldn't. So they charge you interest because had you been able to fund it, it would have offset the liability by the earnings on the amount that you funded it by. But since you can't do that, they charge you an interest component to it.
And that interest goes to the state?
No, the interest is just in the calculation.
Yes,
It just increases the
an
liability,
accounting.
basically. Because had you been able to make contributions, you would have been able to reduce the liability by the earnings.
Sure.
But since you can't, they charge you with interest.
So, if we're doing okay, we want to squirrel some money away. No, you can't. You're not allowed.
Exactly. And then
Can't
there's
win.
an adjustment to the annual required contribution, which is just based on assumptions that are utilized in coming up with the actuarially accrued liability by the actuaries. So the annual OPEB cost in 2011, in the middle of the page, is $3,160,000. The contributions made, which is really a misnomer because they're not contributions, that's the amount that you actually paid for retirees' health benefits, the $946,000. And that reduces the overall liability, which is why it's bracketed. So the increase in the net OPEB obligation is $2,217,000, added to the obligation at the beginning of the year of $6,293,000, gives you a net OPEB obligation at the end of the year of $8,510,000.
So we had an increase this year of $2,200,000?
$2,217,000.
For future.
And if you look at the table on the right below that on page 46, you'll see that the net OPEB obligation in 2009 was $4.1 million, increased by approximately another $2.1 million to $6.2 million, and again the $2 million of $8.5 million. These numbers, the increase in the net OPEB obligation should not materially change from year to year unless there are major changes in the number of employees or in the assumption rates, or the assumptions used in the calculations. But usually those assumptions do not change because it's a long-term projection. This liability is being amortized over 30 years. So,
If I remember right, when you look at the analysis that we have to pay to have done every 2 years on the OPEBs, there's a point where you get to the top of the curve, and then these stop increasing on an annual basis, the future obligations, and they start to decrease. And I forget what year it does that. It's in the threes. I think it's in the 3 million range. But we have that analysis, so you can kind of see where it will change, and then we'll start having less a decreasing future obligation trend.
yeah.
But it
The
takes,
actual
it takes
report,
decades.
charts and the trend analysis
Yeah.
going forward as far as...
But it's decades worth.
So if I'm looking at this, our post-employment benefit obligation when 2009 was 4 million, and this year in 2011 it's 8 million.
Right. It increased approximately $2 million per year.
Right.
By that $2.2 million, the increase in the current year went up that approximately the same amount from 2009 to 2010. I'm looking at 2012, it'll probably be approximately the same thing.
Right.
And is that, we didn't add many employees, so this is really just a percentage increase each year in the cost?
Absolutely.
We actually reduced
Yes.
Well,
We
what's
reduced
happening is as the
payroll by about
employees
20
are
over
working,
20%.
each year they work, they're accruing more benefits. So that's how it works. And then the retirees are living longer, so So they're staying on, they're including the calculation for a longer period of time based upon mortality rates. I mean, the actuarial analysis, I couldn't go through the details of it, but I'm sure your actuary could. Could you use with your actuary?
I'm sorry, I just went blank.
Is it,
AUC? No.
I don't recall who it is. We have the report.
Yes.
But the report,
Can't remember the name.
yeah, it's fairly detailed, and they give you all the assumptions and the narratives and the projections going
I don't
forward.
remember the name.
So,
So am I accurate in assuming that, based on this, that we're spending about a third of our total budget on post-employment?
well, this does not affect the governmental funds.
Okay.
This does not affect the general fund or any of the other funds. This is strictly the GASB statement number 34, the statement of net assets, which I discussed earlier, the full accrual. This expense, the only expense that actually hits your funds is the contributions, the 942,000. The liability is not recorded in the general fund or any other fund.
Right, the 942 is the pay-as-you-go.
Okay.
That's the page
Yeah.
you go, right, which you had always,
Yeah.
prior to GASB 45.
And that's probably about, you're right, Al, it's probably about 30%, I think, of our...
Right.
Right. I mean,
That
that number
number.
is fluctuated based on the healthcare premiums and so forth.
Right.
But that's the only amount that actually is an expenditure within the funds. The liability of the 8,500,000 of 37 million does not affect any of your governmental funds. It doesn't affect your budget at all. That's what you have to budget for your healthcare cost, which is that part of the 942,000.
Right. Ellen, could you just take us to whatever balance sheet it's on? You showed us our current year, or 2011 unpaid taxes, but is there an aggregate of past year that's added to that?
There is. We do a calculation. Jeffrey, you want to explain the
And if what page is that
taxes
on?
receivable? Well, if you look on page 38.
On the bottom of page 38, this will schedule out all the taxes receivable that are in the general fund. Town and county taxes, you see the current year is 460,000. That's for 2011 taxes. Overdue taxes would be 2010 and prior as of this point in time. And the number of property acquired for taxes, those are properties that the town has essentially taken over because for unpaid taxes. It's usually a small amount, usually doesn't fluctuate that much. And then the next column there is the school district taxes, which is because the town guarantees those taxes. They have a receivable, taxes receivable and a payable to the school, so it's offset by that. So total column is at 33,980,000, that's the total taxes receivable. And then there's an allowance of 109,000, and there's also, not shown on this page, but I think it's in the narrative, deferred tax revenues of $1,645,000 for amounts that haven't been collected within those 60 days.
That's current? No.
That's a cumulative number. Deferred tax revenues is a cumulative number. It represents all taxes receivable that haven't been collected within 60 days, which would have, in this case, would have been February, end of February 2012.
February 2012, okay. So the total number that up through the end of 2000, well, you said 2012 too, you added, but that is currently owed to town taxes. Would it be the 841 less the 43?
Right. Correct. Current and prior years.
Okay.
That haven't been collected.
So we know eventually we're going to get it. We can't
absolutely.
count it to revenue, but if for some, like, in an ideal world, we had it all in, all that does is basically increase our fund balance because it's a receivable. We just never know we're going to get it in.
Right. I mean, in 1 year, you could levy $11 million in property taxes and actually collect $11,500,000 if some of these old taxes are paid in that
Right.
current year. So it's a timing difference. The money will eventually come in one way or another.
And our percentage of collection usually, we're never out of the norm, according to Patty. And it looks like this past year we actually were better than previous years. We usually run between 2 and 5% delinquent, and 5's rare. And last year, if we only have half what we've had the last 2 years, that's even better, so we're,
And there's a couple of larger commercial pieces here that are lingered for a number of years, that when they eventually do come in,
so that'd be in this,
yes.
this older chunk.
It would improve that.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just the timing differences to when you're collecting.
Are there any adjustments that are going to happen? I know this is a draft.
This is the draft. The numbers will not change. It's the draft because we just recently received all the information for the CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which is not included in here. We have it at this point, but none of the numbers in here will change.
Okay.
We're just going to add the CAFR statistical section to the report, and we'll be issuing it probably within the week.
Great. And you're going to, I know we want to do this because Dawn's leaving us, so we got this in today.
I had everything done.
So you're going to come back to the
Come back.
board and present at a town board meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Once we establish.
And Dawn, you'll be able to give this eyeball for us, even though you're not physically here, to just give us a quick overview of if it looks all right?
Oh, it definitely looks all right. And we talked about it before, even the audit. I think I explained to most of you the fact that the general fund should be fine, but the highway fund was hit by the hurricanes. There was absolutely nothing that we could do about it. And if you think we're back the last month or so, we're still cleaning up after storms.
I think
And
there's
we're
still,
still doing the cleanup in some areas.
yeah, but I still think there's some chip, I gotta check with Jamie. I think there's still some CHIPS money.
We haven't got this year's CHIPS money yet.
Okay. And I don't think we used,
For the FEMA reimbursement, I believe at this point, we're up to approximately $120,000. Out of that, we should get 70%.
okay.
We
So
won't
that's
get
gonna
a
help
percentage.
rebuild
Absolutely.
this, and let's keep our fingers crossed, November and December this year are fine, but we're able to catch our breath because we haven't had anything.
Well,
This year.
Major this
that was
winter.
to our benefit also, if you think about it for a second. We did not have as many storms
Yeah.
as we usually have.
Do you have any idea what saved us?
I
You
don't wanna just-
got elected and we didn't have any major storms.
I don't want to speculate. I'm more than happy to look it up. and let you know that.
Yeah, right.
See what they have to say?
Yeah.
You warded off the bad weather.
No more bad storms. Any other?
Do you have any other questions while we have the auditors here?
I don't now, but when I go through it, I might, and I could always reach out to you directly.
You all have my cards if anything does come up.
Well, we'll also be presenting to the full board.
Right, exactly.
Is there a plan, a date when you're gonna come back?
If you give me dates, I haven't received any dates as of yet, but
Well,
it'll be in a short period of time.
the meetings in May are May 9th and May 23rd?
9th and 23rd?
Yes.
Isn't the 9th pretty busy?
Yes.
Yeah, we have a few
I would
public hearings.
guess the 9th is not a good day.
Okay. Let me check. May 9th, you said, no, the 23rd. What time is the meeting?
7:30.
I can make it. I have a thing at 6, but I can make it at 7:30.
And you
Well,
usually go
we
on
schedule
first,
it.
don't they usually go on or
Early,
first?
yeah.
I just
Before public comment?
Even though they don't serve
probably
alcohol,
after.
it's the superintendent.
We could,
did it for the
it's
school,
usually after, but
And they don't serve
Well,
alcohol.
just give us
could.
another half an hour.
And you probably won't need that much the second time. I don't know how much time is spent.
they usually, you usually spend 5 or 10 minutes at most presenting the audit, so it's not a, so maybe if we jump them ahead of, at the top of the agenda or something, well, you make the decision,
But you see, Joe.
so they're not sitting around. 7:30.
7:30.
That's fine.
What time did you say your dinner was? You said you-
6.
6.
But it's a cocktail hour and then a dinner. Okay, don't worry, I'll be there.
You'll present the audit.
And then go
And
back.
then go back.
Okay.
Finish the report.
Thank you very much for presenting that to us. It's very informative.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. As I said, if you have any questions even before the meeting, feel free to give me a call. Okay?
So we'll get, you said nothing's gonna change on here, but you're gonna add something.
We're going to, in the back of the report is the statistical section,
Okay.
which is 10-year worth of statistical analysis. It shows the fund balance for 10 years. I mean, there are various schedule, debt schedule, there's the primary taxpayers or the largest taxpayers in the current year and then 9 years ago, and so forth. I think there are 5 different sections that have all statistical information, but it won't affect any of the financial information.
Okay. Is it possible to get the final report to us,
For the meeting?
well before, so we have a chance to review it, so.
Anticipate within the next 2 weeks you'll have the final report.
Perfect,
Okay,
okay.
so a couple weeks before.
That'd be great,
Yeah, definitely within 2 weeks.
that'd be great.
Excellent.
Okay?
Good.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. And that adjourns our work session for today.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Thank you.